piece seemed to be predominantly that you've got people doing what Linda was describing, straight guys going in and being jerks. And I think if you can just take that dimension out of it as a straight person and not be making a dick of yourself, it's probably tolerable for people. But there is took the point from the piece too that God knows there are enough places in the world for straight people to go, a few places of resort for somebody who wants to be away from all of that. Well, I sympathise with that.
That's what I think, and that's why I respect the gay bar, and that's why I don't tend to patronise them, because that's a space where that could be a special place. What place do I have? Perhaps?
They don't often drink tea with a tea strainer.
Yeah,
in gay bars, they're having far more fun than that, Wallace.
That's very, very true. But should there be more respect on the part of the straight sector? I mean, there are so many other bars, as you said, David, they can go to. Why choose a gay bar, Linda?
Well, this is really an issue where if you are gay or LGBTQT, then this is your issue. So you should say, keep out of our bars. That's fair to me. I think otherwise, you know what I mean? Like it's nothing to do with me, because it's not my safe space.
Sure.
So I felt welcome and it was great. And in return, I behaved nicely. Whereas if you're going to a space that is not designed for you and you don't behave nicely, then you should just think about what you're doing and go back to your sports bar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where there's no cricket on.
Or, David, some might argue, isn't this what the fight has been about all along? Nothing says acceptance more than a straight person feeling at home in a gay bar.
No, I don't think so. I think that's still back to front.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, very good. Quite a bit of response on that. As a straight 30-year-old who frequents family bar, I love it. There's no fights, there's great music and dancing, and there's no pressure to, quote-unquote, score chicks. So I really love the atmosphere. So there you have it.
Sounds like a polite person, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now, just finally, briefly, Linda, we now have a little something special for your husband.
So close, no matter how far.
I thought it was going to be a can of Lynx deodorant.
Listen to that. Madonna's done it, so has Fergie and the Royal Family, not the Black Eyed Peas one, and even David Williams. Now Metallica's got on board the kids' book thing. The heavy metalers are bringing out a children's book called The ABCs of Metallica. The proceeds go to their charity, All Within My Hands. The illustrated book looks back at the history of the band from A to Z. Would you buy it?
That's pretty cool, isn't
that cool?
it? Yeah.
What do you reckon? Would you buy it?
Books are our friends. Good on you. Have a go.
But would you buy
anything that might appear? I've seen the artwork and it looks good. I think it could be nice. It did remind me of that Sydney radio station promo. I presume the whole thing was confected a bit. They were giving away free tickets to AC/DC. You just had to ring up and spell AC/DC. so the audio is all about this hopeless guy ringing up and saying and just completely failing.
What books did you buy for your children growing up?
I've
just bought
Clarice Bean.
Yes, Clarice Bean.
Dr. Seuss. I loved Dr. Seuss when I was a kid, and I loved reading it to Mary Margaret, and she loved it.
Isn't it funny too? Because I really loved Roald Dahl, and so I bought Roald Dahl for the kids. And then when I was reading it, I was like, God, what a sexist old fart it was, you know? And some of the stuff, but they love it. They think it's hilarious, and I think that's why you got to remember that kids have different taste to parents.
You bet. So, she liked Roald Dahl.
Yeah.
Very good. On the day we found out that Linda likes cold butter on top of jam on toast.
Makes sense.
Fresh T-shirts.
Yeah, fresh T-shirts. Linda Halloran and David Slake, you've been fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you to Julie Moore for putting the show together. Checkpoint next. I'm back Monday. See ya.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, the Associate Health Minister calls out Big Tobacco for putting putia before people. A video featuring a group of white men with faux moko pretending to be descendants of Waikato Tainui causes outrage. The victim of a vicious homophobic attack in Auckland fights back with a message of love. We talked to the woman who says she was ordered out of a Vodafone store for speaking Samoan. The Defence Force blows up dangerous chemicals in Dunedin. And on the eve of the first big gun buyback event, there are still unanswered questions. And first it was Katrina, now Barry, a tropical storm, is taking a run at rain-soaked New Orleans. Don't forget, you can catch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. A man has taken down an online video showing Pakeha pretending to be Māori after getting several complaints that it was insulting and racist. The video, which appears to have been filmed inside Te Whare Runanga at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, was brought to the attention of the Runanga's cultural advisor, Mori Rapana, last night. It shows a group of Pakeha posing as descendants of the Waikato Tainui Hapu Ngāti Haua, wearing fake wigs and a tāmoko. Mr. Rapana says the Waitangi National Trust Board found it extremely offensive.
We had nothing to do with it. We certainly would not have approved any filming of this nature to take place in the whare or even at the treaty grounds. I've seen many videos of that type of nature before, but I've certainly not seen one that bad. It was absolutely terrible.
The maker of the video, Hudson Miller, says it was part of a church project and there had been no intention to offend anyone. A mother whose baby was killed by her partner hopes he never forgets the way the child looked at him before being fatally shaken. 32-year-old William Wakefield of Upper Hutt has been sentenced to life in prison for murdering 5-month-old Lincoln Wakefield last year. Michael Kropp reports.
In the High Court in Wellington today, Lincoln's mother said in a victim impact statement that she always pictures her son as smiling and giggling, and there will always be a cake on his birthdays. She said Lincoln is now at peace because justice had been served, but she hopes Wakefield replays the moment he picked her son up and looked him in the eyes before violently causing his death. The mother, whose name is suppressed, told the court she had since found a strength she did not know existed, forcing her to make positive changes to piece her life back together. Call Michael Kropp there, Nay.
Justice Dobson set a non-parole period of at least 14 years and 9 months. A News Hub journalist who was the victim of a homophobic assault says he's forgiven his attacker. Aziz Al-Safin and his friend Fergus Favell were attacked by Joden Martin, who said he was offended by seeing them in Auckland's Karangahape Road during Pride Week in February. He kicked and repeatedly punched both men while yelling homophobic slurs. In the Auckland District Court today, Mr Al-Safin read a victim impact statement.
On the night, my friend Ferg and I were made to feel humiliated and worthless. The actions of Joden were intended to make us feel like we didn't belong and that we were wrong in living our lives the way that we were. We were assaulted verbally and physically, and that left a profound effect on both our mental states.
As is Al-Safin. Martin will be sentenced in December. A group of investors in the failed investment firm Ross Asset Management is suing ANZ for allowing it to operate unlawfully. David Ross was jailed for fraud for running his company as a Ponzi scheme after it collapsed in 2012, owing investors $115 million. Kim Savage has more.
The group says that as the company's fund manager, ANZ either knew or should have known that David Ross was operating a Ponzi scheme, but it did nothing to prevent it happening. A Ponzi scheme involves funds from new investors being used to pay out previous investors. The legal action is being funded by a firm that specialises in taking class actions on a no-win, no-fee basis. In April, the Supreme Court dismissed an ANZ attempt to stop the Financial Markets Authority from releasing bank information about Ross Asset Management funds to investors. This is Kim Savage.
The probiotic company at the centre of a controlled explosion in Dunedin will review its handling of a chemical compound that was discovered in a deteriorating state yesterday. The Defence Force bomb squad blew up the container of hydrazine monohydrate this morning. The compound, which a lab technician found crystallising at Bliss Technologies' Glasgow Street laboratory, is toxic and highly combustible. The company's chief executive, Brian Watson, says staff did the right thing by calling in experts.
We'll certainly do a full review of the situation and then understand if there's anything we could have done better. The feedback from the fire service has been very complimentary in how we dealt with it, but we will endeavour to learn from this incident and avoid it in the future.
Brian Watson of Bliss Technologies. 9 people are being treated for serious injuries caused when an Air Canada flight hit clear air turbulence over the Pacific. The Boeing 777 with 284 passengers and crew on board was on its way from Vancouver to Sydney when it dropped suddenly about 5.5 hours into the flight. Some passengers were sent crashing into the ceiling.
We hit turbulence and we all hit the roof and everything fell down and stuff, so people weren't flying.
I was quite terrifying, to be honest, because you just think, oh wow, what's going on right now? It's very terrifying.
The seatbelt signs weren't on. We had no indication that anything was going to happen. I watched a whole bunch of people hit the ceiling of the plane. A couple of the air hostesses were bringing food out at the time and they hit the roof as well.
Altogether, 36 of the 284 people on board were injured and the plane was forced to turn around and make an emergency landing in Hawaii. It's 5:05. On to sport now. The All Blacks' first five, Beauden Barrett, says telling halves partner TJ Perenara he was leaving the Hurricanes was the hardest part of his decision to move north. Barrett has signed with New Zealand Rugby for another 4 years, but will now play his Super Rugby for the Blues. He and Perenara played more than 100 games together for the Hurricanes, and Barrett says it wasn't easy telling his teammates.
It was a tough convo. I've been keeping it close with TJ, throughout the process. He was a man that I just had to keep in the loop. So I told him and Colsey a couple of days ago, which was very difficult, but we got there and they're fully supportive of my decision.
Beauden Barrett will take an extended break after the World Cup and won't join the Blues until midway through next year's Super Rugby season. The Silver Ferns begin their Netball World Cup quest in Liverpool tonight when they play Malawi. They're seeking to restore a reputation severely tarnished when the two sides last met, as Ravinda Hunia reports.
The last time the two sides met was on the Gold Coast at the 2018 Commonwealth Games, where the Queen's 57-53 win only contributed to a disastrous campaign for New Zealand, where they failed for the first time to qualify for the finals. Tonight, though, under new coach Nolene Taurua, the side will be looking to make an early statement in pool play, where they also must face Singapore tomorrow and Barbados on Sunday to ensure safe entry to the preliminary round next week. In England, ko Ravinda Hunia tēnei.
The game starts at 8 o'clock. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's Country Life meets the Manawatu businessman operating his farm like a car assembly plant. The indie pop outfit Pluto are the Friday Night Live act. Nicola Wright selects the mixtape, and there's a brief introduction to the element vanadium, which, because it comes in handy making dental implants, will go nicely with a sonic tonic dedicated to teeth. So smile when you listen tonight. With me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now from Met Service, taking us to midnight tomorrow, Saturday. Northland to North Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. A period of rain this afternoon or evening. Thunderstorms are possible in the north and west. Mainly fine tomorrow. Isolated showers from Waikato southwards. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Waited Upper. Scattered rain this evening, otherwise fine. South Taranaki to Kapiti, isolated showers turning to rain for a time this afternoon or evening. Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough, a period of rain this afternoon or evening. Then mainly fine. Rain returning tomorrow evening. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered light rain this afternoon, mainly in Otago and Southland. Fine tomorrow, but rain developing about the high country and southern lakes in the afternoon. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain. Heavy falls. Thunderstorms are possible about southern Westland and Fiordland. And at the Chathams, a few showers. It's just after 5:08.
Thanks, Paul. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The tactics deployed by Philip Morris in targeting Māori to use its new e-cigarette are motivated by money and not concern for public health. That's the view of Associate Health Minister Jenny Salisa after Checkpoint revealed the tobacco giant is selling its IQOS product to Māori at half price and targeting Māori at marae and sports clubs in South Auckland. Philip Morris claims the IQOS, which heats the tobacco rather than burns it, is 90% safer than cigarettes, although some experts say the harm could eventually prove similar to smoking. About 37% of Māori women smoke, nearly 3 times the rate of the general population. And Philip Morris claims the goal of their community activations in Māori communities is to help smokers quit. But Manukau East MP Jenny Salisa, the minister responsible for regulating e-cigarettes and vaping, told Guy on Espiner that she's unconvinced.
I'm extremely sceptical of any claims of big tobacco companies, be it Philip Morris or any other tobacco companies, saying that they are somehow wanting to help Māori people or Pacific people to help them with smoking. I mean, tobacco companies have long claimed somehow to want to help people in this space, but what I can say is that I think they are only really truly answerable to their shareholders, and so I'm very, very sceptical of their claims of wanting to help.
So what would your message be to Philip Morris? I mean, you've seen these reports, you've seen their own words, that they are going out to marae, they're going out to places with high Māori populations, targeting people probably in your electorate, and they're saying, look, you can have this device for half price. What do you think about those tactics?
Well, I don't agree at all with any of those tactics, and I've also seen and heard their claims that they would like to exit the business of selling cigarettes, including selling cigarettes here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. My message to them is if they're wanting to exit this business of selling cigarettes, nothing is stopping them from selling cigarettes right now.
And the point here too, Minister, is that this is still an addictive product, isn't it? I mean, Philip Morris doesn't deny that this is a nicotine product. And, the mini tobacco sticks in the IQOS, it's still $20 a packet. You could easily be spending $100 on this. So in terms of low-income people that they're targeting, it still could be hooking them on something that's going to cost them $100 a week.
It is absolutely ridiculous that on the one hand they say that they would like to stop selling cigarettes, which has nicotine, that is addictive. Yes, you're right. And this is one of the reasons why it's important to bring in this legislation to ensure that we regulate vaping and the things that go in to these vaping products.
So is there anything you can do as Minister in this space to combat these tactics that you've expressed concern about today? As far as your reading of the regulations go, is it okay for them to be going out and doing what they call these community activations and targeting Māori with this product?
The best thing I can do is what I've already announced, which is actually that I am bringing through legislation to regulate vaping and all the products to do with vaping, e-cigarettes and smokeless tobacco.
Would that have an impact, do you think, on what Philip Morris is doing with this IQOS product?
I really, really hope so, because we are looking at regulating and ensuring that the products are safe, but also we're looking at regulating what goes into those products. One of the things that the vaping amendment bill is going to look at as well, and it would be allowed under the regulations, is these flavours that seem to be attracting a lot of our young people. I'm very concerned that we ensure that we do not attract our young people to vaping. Right now, what Ash is telling us in terms of these surveys is that is actually not happening here in New Zealand yet. In terms of those who are year 10, there's only 1.9 of our young people who are now vaping on a daily basis. And so for me, that gives me a lot of hope that a lot of our young people are not actually attracted to vaping. However, this is one of the reasons why introducing the legislation, ensuring that we regulate vaping products is so important, because we want to ensure that we are not attracting our young people to these products.
And that's Associate Health Minister Jenny Salisa speaking to In-Depth's Guyan Espiner. It's almost 13 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Whoever lifts the trophy at Lord's on Sunday will make history. Neither New Zealand nor England have ever clinched a Cricket World Cup win. But now the two will battle it out after England surged into their first World Cup final for 27 years, demolishing Australia overnight by a sensational 8 wickets. And they have the edge going into the final. So can the Black Caps, who were runners-up to Australia in Melbourne in 2015, take it one step further this time? Here's sports editor Stephen Hewson.
Hit away over mid-on. How fitting it is that Captain Morgan is the man that leads his team to Lord's for a World Cup final.
England will go into the final full of confidence after their comprehensive semi-final win over defending champions Australia. Despite having much more recent finals experience, New Zealand, though, are the underdogs. Beaten by England in pool play and playing the hosts in their own backyard, the Black Caps know they're up against it. But as they showed in their semi-final win over India, when everyone's writing them off, they're quite possibly at their most dangerous. And England captain Owen Morgan rates the Black Caps as the toughest side to beat.
India were completely done and dusted after the early wickets that New Zealand took. They bowled extremely well and took their opportunities. I think New Zealand throughout the whole tournament have been probably the hardest side to beat and the best side in the group stages. I think their performance in the semi-final was probably their best. And they're going to be a very difficult side to beat on Sunday.
The Black Caps and England have both played just one match at Lord's during this tournament. Ironically, they were both beaten by Australia in pool play. But in the wake of his side's semi-final loss to England, Australia skipper Aaron Finch said the Black Caps have a greater chance than the odds suggest.
It'll be a hell of a game. New Zealand, we know that they fight and scrap for every run. They're dynamic in the field. They're a team that are never out of the contest. England play a high energy, higher risk game probably than New Zealand, so I think it'll be a great game.
New Zealand fast bowler Lockie Ferguson says Sunday's match shapes is the highlight of his career.
Everyone on the team is pretty emotional in a way to be playing World Cup, especially for your country. It's definitely going to be probably the highlight of my career so far for sure, but at the same time it's just another game of cricket. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of Kiwi fans, and so hopefully they'll be in support.
Lockie Ferguson missed New Zealand's pool game loss to England at Durham, but believes that may be a blessing as England haven't had the chance to face him at the tournament.
In a way that might play in my favour, but with a team like that does throw a lot of punches, for me I think it's important to throw punches back and keep looking to be aggressive and take wickets.
It's 6 years since New Zealand and England last played a one-dayer at Lord's, back in 2013 when the Black Caps won by 5 wickets. 4 of the current Black Cap squad played in that match: Kane Williamson, Ross Taylor, Martin Guptill and Tim Southey, while Trent Boult missed it through injury. Guptill, who's struggled for runs at this tournament, will have fond memories of that game where he made 103 not out as he guided the side to victory. But no matter the outcome of the final, the bank accounts of both teams will get a healthy boost. The winning team walks away with $6 million, while the runners-up will get $3 million. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
And some Kiwis are now dropping everything to travel to the UK for the final. One of them is New Zealander Ben Irwin, who lives in Doha.
Well, I was actually in the UK for 3 round-robin games. I saw the South Africa game, the West Indies game, the England game, and I went back to Doha, 4 days of work. On the last day of work, we had that cracking semi-final, and I just thought I had to be here. So 2 minutes after that game was done, I'd booked flights and came over, no ticket, crashing at a mate's place, but you've got to be here. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really. You know, Black Caps playing England, World Cup final at Lord's. It will probably never happen again in my generation, so I have to be here. Yeah, booking flights 6 hours before you leave was pretty expensive, and I've looked into tickets. I've a few sort of leads I'm following up, but to get in there, just one ticket is, it's about the cost of a half-decent Japanese import 4-door. So we'll see how it goes. I might just end up going to the fan zone, but even if I'm there, it's all about the vibe and being amongst Kiwis for this big day.
And that's Kiwi Ben Irwin, who hasn't quite got his ticket sussed yet for the big match. I was actually looking online at some ticket resale outlets, and some of them are upwards of $7,000. It is almost 18 after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback. Will you be pulling an all-nighter for the cricket on Sunday? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Wondering what the best snacks are to stay up at that time of the evening. Give us your recommendations. Let's go to Dunedin now, where the Defence Force's bomb squad blew up a dangerous and unstable chemical this morning after it was found deteriorating at a laboratory. Businesses were evacuated and streets cordoned off as emergency services dealt with the volatile compound, which was discovered yesterday. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown was at the scene.
The chemical at the centre of today's drama was hydrazine monohydrate. It's used as rocket fuel and pesticide production. It even has potential as an alternative to hydrogen in fuel cells. And before today, it's fair to say most of South Dunedin had never heard of it, let alone knew it was sitting on a shelf in a lab 1 street from the suburb's main drag. But when it was discovered in a deteriorating crystallised state by a lab technician at probiotic manufacturer Bliss Technologies yesterday afternoon, that all changed.
We were dealing with 50 millilitres, so a very small quantity, as I say, but again, it can be relatively unstable, and in terms of the effect that amount could have, it was minimal, but again, we take all precautions to ensure the safety of everybody in the immediate area.
That's Senior Station Officer Chris Lind describing how a small glass vial of the compound led to the closure and evacuation of much of Glasgow Street, as well as a bomb squad call-out. He says the turnout, which included 5 fire trucks and a hazmat command unit, could have been an overreaction. But when the compound is as combustible and toxic as hydrazine monohydrate, you don't mess about.
We were informed that the product needed to be disposed of by detonation. Obviously that service is provided by Defence, so after making the right contacts, we managed to get Defence to attend this morning. The detonation worked effectively.
The bomb squad arrived on the scene shortly after 7. After preparing the area and assessing the risks, the cordons were widened slightly, and the chemical was carried into an industrial yard by bomb squad members wearing protective equipment. Then about 9:30 in the morning. But despite all the fuss, local worker Dorji Basang says the outcome was a bit of a flop.
It was a bit underwhelming, the explosion, wasn't it? We're hoping for something a bit more Hollywood. But yeah, all's well ends well.
Like other workers in the area, he knew very little about the substance or its storage just down the road until being told to evacuate as they were in the blast zone.
We were just minding our own business, having morning tea, and my boss went out to retrieve something from the car in the middle of the blast radius. So they told us, yeah, you might want to get out of here, there's going to be an explosion.
They didn't realise that there was anybody in the building, so they're like, oh no, you better get out, you know. So we had to go in and turn off the ovens and stuff like that, you know, turn off all the equipment, you know.
We didn't know anything about it. Last night when it was on breaking news, our business owners didn't know that this was going to happen until this morning.
Bliss Technologies Chief Executive Brian Watson says staff did all the right things.
It was stored within an appropriate chemical handling container, so all protocols within the lab were appropriately dealt with.
Mr Watson says the company will attempt to learn from the incident.
We'll certainly do a full review of the situation and then understand if there's anything we could have done better. The feedback from the fire service has been very complimentary in how we dealt with it. The staff member absolutely did the right thing in exploring some expert input into what to do around handling. But we will endeavour to learn from this incident and avoid it in the future.
Fire and Emergency completed their clean-up shortly before midday. With all the cordons lifted, the building was handed back to Bliss Technologies. In South Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Unanswered questions hang over the first of more than 250 gun buyback events across the country. The first will take place at Riccarton Racecourse in Christchurch, with more than 900 registrations so far for Canterbury. The police were keen to get the message across today about how easy and smooth these events will be, but they were not so keen to answer more direct questions. Logan Church reports.
The police are hoping that hundreds of Canterbury gun owners will turn up tomorrow at the Riccarton Racecourse for the first gun buyback event. Senior Sergeant Craig Scott explains how it works.
Okay, this is the first stage where the clients come in. We come into here with their weapons and we clear them using the bullet catchers here. We clear the weapons with our staff. We then, once everything's clear, we put a yellow flag into the weapon to show it's been cleared. So once it's been through, the clearance has been cleared with visually and physically, then you put the flag into the chamber. Once they've been cleared, we move forward to the next stage.
The collection room itself, a popular spot usually for award dinners and school balls, has a sort of festival air about it today. There are flags outside, tea and coffee at the ready. Trestle tables also line the room.
Once we're in the hall, there's some options here. If they haven't been online and signed up, they can come to the kiosks here and go online and do their notifications. If they have been through, there's some lanes here you can look at. Buyback here or amnesty here. The computer program sends away the account details for payment. The weapon's tagged by us with a tag, barcoded and scanned, and goes out the back.
1,415 firearms are already registered to be handed in Canterbury. This location is just the first event in the region. And District Commander Mike Johnson says it was picked deliberately.
This venue's very appropriate. It's quite a secure venue. We've got the fencing, we've got the other things, and it's away from other things that are going on at the racecourse during this period. So this is one of the venues. We've got 43 venues in Canterbury over the next 6 months, and they spread right across Canterbury, so the rural areas as well.
And security is key.
So we've got a number of security measures, and you can see from the staff around today, we're replicating what we're doing tomorrow. So we already have armed staff who'll be at this venue, because our whole goal in this process is to have a safe amnesty process for all involved.
But not all are in favour of these events. Earlier today, the Deerstalkers Association described it as a circus, raising concerns about how much people would be paid for their firearm. The base price set for the buyback scheme is the wholesale price, not necessarily the price that people paid. I tried asking Mike Johnson if people could leave the event with their firearm if they changed their mind.
So the people who we imagine are coming tomorrow, who we believe are coming tomorrow, are people who are online and registered, and we believe that the majority of people will want to hand those firearms over.
But what about that minority? I tried again.
So there's a 6-month window of amnesty, so there is that process. But as I say, if people have come here with their firearms, their intent is to hand them over. That's my view.
And again.
So we will make sure that they feel safe and secure to hand them over, and we'll make sure that they hand those firearms over and that they feel safe and secure doing so.
The police later confirmed via email people can leave the premises if they change their mind. But if the owner indicates they won't ever hand it in, the police can take action. What that action is wasn't explained, although Mike Johnson told us they would not forcibly take someone's firearm.
This is a process that we're invested in, and we're encouraging all of those firearms. There is a 6-month window, as I said, but people who come here are intending to hand those firearms over.
But for now, the clock is ticking. Gun owners have 6 months to hand in their now illegal firearms. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
An online video showing a group of white men with fake moko and black wigs pretending to be descendants of a Waikato Tainui sub-tribe has outraged members of the Māori community. The 8-minute clip, which was made to look like it was filmed at Te Whare Runanga at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, was posted to YouTube by a church group. The Runanga's cultural advisor told RNZ the Waitangi National Trust had no hand in making the video, and their jaws dropped when it came to their attention. Te Aniwa Hurihanganui has the story.
Thing here? Nah, just some kumara and wood pigeon. Good kai though. A few blankets. Be good for the tamariki back in the village.
At the beginning of the film, the group of white actors wearing fake wigs and moko kauai are scouring the bush when they come across a young girl sleeping. It's the story of Tarore, a 12-year-old girl from the Waikato Tainui hapu, Ngāti Hauā, who attended a missionary school and was killed on her sleeping mat in 1836. The backdrop for most of the video is meant to be Te Whare Runanga, or the meeting house, found at the top of the Waitangi Treaty Grounds. When the Runanga's cultural advisor, Mori Rapana, saw the video for the first time last night, his first reaction was
shocked, disgusted, angered that people could present such a misinterpretation, a culturally insensitive video portraying tupuna that they have absolutely no affiliation, no connection to. Yeah, it was certainly a jaw-dropping moment. I haven't seen any video. I've seen many videos of that type of nature before, but I've certainly not seen one that bad. It was absolutely terrible.
Mr. Rapana says the footage of the Runanga was used through CGI and not filmed on the grounds itself. And he says the film was not sanctioned by anyone from the Waitangi National Trust.
We had nothing to do with it. We certainly would not have approved any filming of this nature to take place. We get requests quite regularly from directors, producers, photographers asking for permission to use aspects of the treaty grounds, and we certainly did not give approval or sanction any of the use of Te Whare Runanga and the treaty grounds in this.
RNZ has today tracked down the maker of the video, network engineer Hudson Miller, who says it was a homemade church project and uploaded to YouTube last July. He says the girl, Tarore, was an influential figure in the Christianity movement in New Zealand, and he wanted to bring her story to life.
Then I put together just a bunch of people in the church who wanted to do it, just grabbed what kind of things we could to put together to make a story just to show in the church.
Mr. Miller did not seek the permission of Ngāti Hauā to show the story of Tarore or from the Waitangi National Trust to use the images of the Whare Runanga. But he says he included a disclaimer warning people that the content in the video wasn't necessarily an accurate retelling of historical events.
And that's why I did write that disqualifier at the front. I wanted them to understand that it was only meant to tell the story. It wasn't the symbols in it and everything in it weren't meant to represent anybody or anything in particular.
But you have actors acting as specific people like Tarore from that sub-tribe.
As as best we could, yeah.
Since speaking with RNZ, Mr Hudson has taken the video down. But Treaty of Waitangi lecturer Hemopediki Simon says his actions illustrate an ongoing ignorance in New Zealand that needs to be addressed.
Another confirmation of just how ignorant this country is in terms of our history. I'm not saying that you can't tell this story, by all means, but don't get a Pākehā man to put on a moko kauai, a female moko. There's a way of doing this with cultural sensitivity that could be highly appreciated.
RNZ has contacted Ngāti Haua for comment, but they are yet to respond. For Checkpoint, I'm Tianiwa Hurihanganui.
And if you're listening on radio, go back and look at that item. It has the video that Tianiwa is talking about. We'll put it up on our Facebook page and online. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Bowden Barrett shuns overseas deals to move to the Blues. An Auckland man who murdered his mother and set fire to her is sentenced to life in jail. And we speak to a woman who says she was kicked out of a store for speaking Samoan. As always, we'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program today, so do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or we do love a good old semi-old-fashioned email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Here's Paul with the headlines.
Thank you, Lisa. The Associate Health Minister, Jenny Salesa, says a tobacco company is not targeting Māori with its new e-cigarette out of concern for public health. RNZ revealed this week that Philip Morris is selling its IQOS device at half price at marketing drives held at Malai and rugby league clubs in South Auckland. Philip Morris claims its product is 90% safer than cigarettes. Ms. Salesa says she believes Philip Morris is motivated by money. A man has taken down an online video showing Pākehā pretending to be Māori after getting several complaints that it was insulting and racist. The video appears to have been filmed inside Te Whare Runanga at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds. It shows a group of Pākehā posing as descendants of the Waikato Tainui Hapu Ngāti Haua while wearing fake wigs and a tā moko. The perpetrator of a vicious homophobic assault on two men in Auckland, central Auckland, said he attacked them because they were being disrespectful by standing near a church. Joden Martin attacked News Hub journalist Azid Al-Safin and his friend Fergus Favell without any provocation in Karangahape Road during Pride Week in February. In the Auckland District Court today, Martin's lawyer Judith Walsh said her client's thinking had been muddled. An Auckland man who murdered his mother and set her Mount Roskill home on fire will spend at least 10 years behind bars. Linda Edwards' body was found inside her raised one-bedroom unit on Rainford Street in November 2016. Her 25-year-old son, Kerry Brackenridge, strangled her to death before setting her house on fire. He admitted killing his mother but pleaded not guilty to criminal charges, unsuccessfully arguing he was legally insane at the time. 9 people are being treated for serious injuries after an Air Canada flight hit sudden turbulence over the Pacific Ocean. Some passengers were sent crashing into the ceiling and the plane was forced to turn around and make an emergency landing in Hawaii. Those are the headlines. It is 27 minutes to 6.
Nothing like a turbulent story to give you the heebies about travelling long haul. Business now with Nona. Nona. So tell me, we have got some more house sale numbers, haven't we? But house sales down, but prices up.
Yeah, so the volume of sales are down 4%, and the prices across the country are up 4%. Down, up, there you go. Swings and roundabouts, I guess they say. Anyway, look, the market is very slow, though. And so while prices are up, the sales aren't going very quickly. It's taking longer to sell houses as well. And so in the major centres, like, for example, Auckland, prices are flat and have even dipped a little bit. For example, in Marlborough, they are down just slightly. Elsewhere, though, prices are still fairly strong. And but again, it's partly because for one reason why sales could potentially be slow is that first-time home buyers and others are finding it hard to get a mortgage. So banks have kind of cut back a little bit on their lending, and they're holding would-be lenders to a higher test in terms of their affordability, so a higher threshold for interest rates, even though they're fairly low. As well, people may not be selling because where are they going to move? There's a restricted number of houses on the market, so it's making it hard to sort of think about moving up when there's really very little choice about what you might be able to buy. So that's another reason.
Interesting. Okay, so manufacturing activity, this has picked up slightly, but the sector's job market seems to have, soured a little bit. So what does this all mean for us?
Yeah, we've seen this for a while. So manufacturing activity. Now, this is not a survey. If it is a survey, it's a survey of activity, not opinion. So this is what manufacturers are actually doing. And what they're finding is that they're not hiring as many people. Their orders are somewhat down, and they have a higher inventory. So these are not good pointers for economic growth. So that does indicate that we've been seeing now for some time that the manufacturing sector is slowing. We'll have some services numbers out on Monday, which will give us a better picture of how things are really moving in the broader economy. But it did look that manufacturing in the regions, for example, the North Island was quite slow. And so it remains to be seen what's happening there. And, I think that's a reflection of what we're seeing just generally. Trade issues are still keeping markets, not just here in New Zealand, a little bit on the, I guess pensive would be a word, wondering which way the wind will blow. And we've certainly seen that in Asia with more data coming out of China later today and again on Monday. So despite that, our market is still looking pretty good. We closed up 14 points to another record close of 10,701. And our dollar is buying 66.8 U.S. cents, which is fairly strong. And that's partly because of the U.S. thinking about cutting interest rates there. 95.5 Australian, again, quite a strong number, and 53.3 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Palcier with Business this Friday. Let's go to sport now. All Blacks first five, Beauden Barrett, has shaken up Super Rugby by signing a 4-year deal with the Blues. The move ends the number 10's long relationship with the Hurricanes, where he's played for the last 8 seasons. The rugby star says he turned down lucrative contracts overseas to do what's best for his family.
I guess the underlying thing was I knew that I wasn't ready to go offshore, and I knew that I know I have plenty left in the tank and plenty to give to New Zealand rugby. So we sort of worked back from there and figured out what would be the best thing for me and for my family and for my rugby. So yeah, 4 years at a new franchise. It's a big call, but it's one that I'm really looking forward to.
Beauden Barrett says the decision to move to Auckland was a tough one, but he's thankful for his time in the capital.
Wellington and the Hurricanes will always and have been a huge part of my life, and without them I wouldn't be the player or the person that I am today. So I've got a lot to thank Mark Hammett and Alama Amir, all the previous coaches, Clark Laidlaw and John Plumtree, Chris Boyd, all the good people at the Canes. I'm leaving a lot of very good friends, not just in the game, but outside of the game in Wellington, but I'll only ever be a 1 hour flight away.
All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says while it's a loss for the Hurricanes, it's an overall win for New Zealand rugby.
I think anything that keeps them in the country playing is great. So, he wouldn't have made the decision to leave the Hurricanes lightly. But, he is married to a lovely young lady who comes from here, and I think we all know that we're guided by our wives where we live usually, and he's made the decision to not travel down, and I think that's in the best interest of him.
Steve Hansen there. And Beauden Barrett will be pulling on the blue jersey from mid-2020. An Auckland man who murdered his mother and set fire to her Mount Roskill home has been jailed for life. Linda Edwards' body was found inside her raised one-bedroom unit on Ranford Street in November 2016. Her son, Kitty Brackenridge, was eventually charged with her murder but pleaded not guilty, saying he was legally insane at the time. Our court reporter, Annika Smith, reports.
Kitty Breckenridge was 25 years old when he strangled his mother to death after an argument in her Mount Roskill home. He then stole her bank card and bought cigarettes and a small dose of petrol he used to set her sofa alight. After the flames were extinguished, only the charred remains of the house and Linda Edwards' body remained. This morning, her brother, Alan Edwards, told Breckenridge he deserved prison through a letter read to the court. These are his words, but not his voice.
What was so bad in your life that made you do this? Seriously, what was so bad you took your own mother's life?
Breckenridge admitted he was responsible for his mother's death, but he pleaded not guilty to charges of murder, arson and using her bank card, arguing he was legally insane at the time. On the 7th of May, a jury, finding he understood what he was doing at the time was morally wrong, returned guilty verdicts. This morning, the court heard the father of two had drug-induced schizophrenia at the time of the murder. His mother had helped him stop using methamphetamine 2 months beforehand, but Justice Jargo said a psychotic state, which warped his view of his mother and the world, continued.
You thought the sun god told you your mother was evil, the devil, and lying about your father's identity. You said you felt you had accomplished a mission in killing her and needed to signal that to the sun god, which you did by setting fire to her unit.
Crown Prosecutor Sam McMullen said the young man's journal writing showed there was a level of premeditation to the crime. He asked for a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 11 years. But Breckenridge's lawyer, Marie Dyberg QC, argued a life term would be manifestly unjust. She said premeditation required rational planning and her client had suffered serious psychosis for a long period before the murder.
I think it's accepted that without the mental illness, without the psychosis, there wouldn't have been the offending, because it's quite clear he was very close and loved his mother, and there's just no explanation for why he did what he did except, for the psychosis.
Ms. Dyberg submitted a finite term of 11 years in jail was appropriate. The court heard Breckenridge had spent a short period as an inpatient before stabilising on medication, and a psychiatrist had now found he was in a state of sustained remission. He had accepted he would now be serving a lengthy prison sentence. Justice Jargo said probation, psychiatric and cultural reports showed Breckenridge had a disjointed and drug-affected upbringing.
Your biological father was not in contact with you. You were close with your mother, but that relationship deteriorated as your drug taking and mental trauma intensified.
Breckenridge's brow was furrowed during this morning's hearing as members of his family wept in the public gallery.
Your family has been fractured by your offending. While you have some support from your sisters and partner, that is tempered by their loss of Ms. Edwards at your hand and their need for her to have justice.
Justice Jargo sentenced him to life in jail with a minimum non-parole period of 10 years. Atuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith aho.
It's about 18 minutes away from 6. Some of your feedback now. I was wanting tips on how to stay awake during the cricket on Sunday. This person says drink kava. I think that might actually send me to sleep. While someone else has said going to stay up for the whole game, best way to stay up is to go for a walk, move around for a bit when you can, and do a few star jumps in the lounge. It really helps. And maybe keeping the temperature not too warm, even though cricket's supposed to be a summer game. Anyway, keep the text coming, 2101 on the text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A former Deputy Mayor of Porirua says she's complained to Vodafone after she was kicked out of their store for speaking Samoan. Latia Ahoy says she was leaving North City Mall in Porirua after store staff had refused to serve her when she stopped and spoke in Samoan to a woman she knew. She says a Vodafone worker who had earlier been rude to her abruptly told her to stop speaking Samoan and to get out.
There doesn't have to be a circumstance in order for me to speak Samoan or Tokalone or Chinese, let alone Te Reo, because I speak all four languages. Porirua is a diverse city, and when I come across an individual that doesn't speak English that well, then I will speak in the mother tongue of that individual. So there was no circumstance that led to me speaking Samoan to this particular elderly lady. It was much more comfortable for them because of their age group. She's my mum and dad's age, so I'm not going to speak English to them if they feel much more comfortable and can have a better conversation in their own mother language.
So what was the reaction from one of the store workers when you did speak Samoan?
It was disappointing. He stood up and he said, "Don't come into my store and speak your language," something along those lines. And I swung around and I said, "I beg your pardon, if I want to speak my language or our language to whoever I want to, I will, and not you or anybody is going to tell me otherwise." But by then, he'd asked me to pretty much get out of the store if I was going to speak my language.
When I'm talking about context, this was not isolated, was it? You had words with the person in the store leading up to this. Can you explain what that was about?
Well, I went in there because I wanted to discuss or talk about a promotion that Apple and Vodafone were having. So when I asked him about it, he said to me he didn't know what I was talking about. So Latia, being cheeky, I spoke slowly to the guy. I says, Vodafone and Apple are having a joint promotion of some sort with phones. And not long after that, he says, "Look, have a good day." And just wouldn't serve me, wouldn't talk to me, which I was, I was pretty dumbfounded because I've walked into Vodafone stores on numerous occasions in different locations around New Zealand, and I've never had somebody just refuse to serve you. So it came as a shock.
So how would you characterise his reaction to the fact that you were speaking Samoan? Was it a racist response in your view?
After reflecting on it since Tuesday, since he said it, I'm not sure whether, personally, deep down inside my gut instinct, I don't think this individual is racist. The comment that came out of his mouth was appalling. My instant thought was, look, you're either an extremist racist or you're just a dumbass racist. Meaning, it was either a slip of the tongue because I was speaking another language to a woman that he was serving, or he is an extremist racist.
But by both those options, Latia, they're both racism in the end, as you've defined them there.
Yeah, I know. It sounds really dumb, but this is it in a nutshell for me.
So it makes you uncomfortable too, clearly.
Well, it does, because what I don't want is for me, it's really sad. I don't think he meant it the way it came across, but the mere fact that he wasn't, he didn't stop and got a fight. He didn't have that reaction as if, oh wow, did I really say that? Because what I said to him was, mate, given what happened on March the 15th in Christchurch, why did you say that? And, he just looked at me and, just absolute no thought about what he just said, and just continued to say, out of my store, please. You're going to speak another language, out of my store. And no one should have to put up with that. Whether it doesn't matter what language it is, but you want to work in a city that is probably more culturally diverse next to Auckland, then you cannot come out with statements like that.
So sorry to interrupt, what's Vodafone said to you about it? Because you have complained.
I have.
apparently they've stood the individual down, and that they're just looking into the whole situation.
But when you had contact with Vodafone in the first instance, when you complained on the day, was there not a slightly different response? What was said to you then about speaking Samoan? What was raised?
That was the next day. Vodafone did ring me the next day, and what was said to me was he felt that the individual that made the comment to me about, not being able to speak my language, he said to his boss that he felt that I was offending him in my language, or talking about him, or being rude towards him in my language, which is why he stood up and made that comment.
Were you?
No, I wasn't. And what my response was, I would have, if I had offended him speaking English, he may not have come out with that statement. But it was the mere fact that I spoke another language other than English. He felt he had to resort to coming out with that statement. I could have said whatever in English, Samoan, or Te Reo. He still had no right to come out with the statement that he made. Everybody in this country has a right to speak whatever language that they want, doesn't matter what the situation is, without having to be told that they cannot speak that language, whether it's offensive or not.
So are you still a Vodafone customer?
I am. I'm thinking about looking at other options. I'm not just pretty gutted about what had happened, but just disappointed that, my service provider didn't see me as a customer when I walked into their store, but instead flatly refused to serve me, and all three staff members stonewalled me, and then it just went from bad to worse with speaking Samoan in their store. And being told that I couldn't, and if I was to continue, then I needed to leave. I mean, who does that? It's the year 2019. The whole sad story about this is, I'm saddened because I look at my grandchildren and I think, holy heck, what chance do they have in life if this is the year 2019 and, we're still having individuals make these sorts of statements? What chance do they have?
And that's Latia Ahoy there. We've received a statement from Vodafone. It says it's taking the complaint very seriously and the employee was immediately suspended pending a thorough investigation into the incident. It says it's in close contact with Latia and prides itself on its customer interactions. It's about 8 minutes away from 6. Let's get to your feedback about our earlier story about a video showing white men dressed up with a fake moko and black wigs pretending to be descendants of a Waikato Tainui tribe here. Michael's been in touch and says, Struth, I often get annoyed by overexcited political correctness. However, Europeans depicting an historical Māori event in the form that it was shown is crass, utterly inappropriate, stupid, and yes, they clearly need to take a good look at their thinking. Kate, though, says, if Pākehā can't tell a Māori story, does that mean that Māori can't tell a Bible story, a fairy story, a British story? She asks with 4 question marks. Time this nonsense stopped. That's Te Aniwa Hurahanganui's story. It'll be up online, so check out the video that we're talking about and look at the pictures for yourself. In the event of unexpected turbulence, it pays to keep your seatbelt on. That's the familiar safety advice from flight crew. And passengers on an Air Canada flight found out the hard way what happens when they don't. 37 people were injured, 9 seriously, when their plane hit severe and sudden turbulence high above the Pacific Ocean. Elizabeth Brown has more.
5.5 hours into the flight between Vancouver and Sydney and flying at an altitude of 36,000 feet, the Boeing 777 with 284 passengers and crew on board dropped suddenly.
We hit turbulence and we all hit the roof and everything fell down and stuff, so people weren't flying.
Planes regularly encounter turbulence and passengers are reminded to buckle up, but this woman said there was absolutely no warning.
The seatbelt signs weren't on. We had no indication that anything was going to happen. I watched a whole bunch of people hit the ceiling of the plane. A couple of the air hostesses were bringing food out at the time and they hit the roof as well.
The Australian band Hurricane Fall was also on the flight. Band member Tim Trickey says he was one of the lucky ones who had their seatbelt on.
Started getting a little bit rocky, so I thought I'd better buckle up. And then about 5 seconds later, you just watched everyone's head in the plane who wasn't wearing a seatbelt just hit the roof like a jack in a box. It's pretty scary to see.
Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling and flight radar data shows the plane suddenly losing speed as it passed about 500 kilometres from Hawaii. A little later, realising how many people were injured, the pilots turned it around and diverted to Honolulu Airport to make an emergency landing. Tim Trickey says his band's vocalist was one of those treated on arrival.
One of our other band members, our mate, he smacked it real hard and put a massive dent up in the luggage compartment.
30 people were taken to hospital with injuries ranging from bloody noses to serious head wounds. Other passengers have been put up in hotels while arrangements are made to resume the flight. One Australian woman said she was unsure how long it would be until they could board a flight home, but on the bright side, she'd never been to Hawaii. In a statement, Air Canada simply said the plane encountered unforecasted and sudden turbulence. For Checkpoint, Elizabeth Brown.
Ooh, and that did not sound like a fun time. Speaking of transport, though, here's some traffic news for you if you are in Christchurch. A fire has closed Riccarton Road to traffic westbound from the intersection with Wharanui Road and Clyde Road and Middleton Road eastbound. Road users should use Blenheim Road for east and westbound travel at the moment. Now, due to the size of the fire, these closures are likely to be in place for some time. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina killed 1,500 people in New Orleans, leaving parts of the city uninhabitable for years. Now, the low-lying city is under threat again as Tropical Storm Barry approaches. It's expected to make landfall in the next 24 hours and could bring 48 hours of continuous rain. Now, the big problem is the Mississippi River, which flows through the city. It's already lapping at the top of the levees due to months of record flooding upstream. Parts of the city are already experiencing flooding and residents are being told to be prepared as Barry approaches. The CBC's Kim Brunhuber is in New Orleans and has this report.
On a flooded New Orleans street, a man is floating around on an inflatable mattress, laughing. A rare, light-hearted moment. But with a tropical storm barreling down on Louisiana, for some, the danger is already here. Residents trudged through knee-deep water after floodwaters inundated the city yesterday. Others have been forced to abandon their cars.
We're just completely stranded here.
14 years ago, during Hurricane Katrina, Plaquemines Parish outside New Orleans was underwater. Now, thousands have been ordered to evacuate.
Hammers, tornadoes.
The severe weather, including tornadoes, have damaged homes like Eric Ellenberger's.
The whole bedroom was blown out, and my wife and dog were they were under the rubble, but they were fine.
The storm is forecast to make landfall by Friday or early Saturday, the first Atlantic hurricane of the 2019 season, according to Benjamin Schott with the National Weather Service.
Water is the killer 75% of the time when it comes to hurricanes and tropical storms. It's not the wind.
Now neighbors are helping each other, filling sandbags. For many in Louisiana, like Tony Terry, dealing with rising water has become a way of life.
We still have 100 sandbags on the back of our house from 2016. So this is us gearing up again.
Mike Yenny, president of Jefferson Parish, says they're ready for the storm.
When our pumps are running, the capacity they are pumping is enough to fill an Olympic swimming pool in 2 seconds.
But the mayor of New Orleans, LaToya Cantrell, says the storm is predicted to move so slowly and dump so much rain that pumps could be overwhelmed.
We cannot pump our way out of the water levels and the waterfalls that are expected to hit the city of New Orleans. We need you to understand this and, again, be prepared to shelter in place.
And, says Jefferson Parish Sheriff Joseph Lapinto, don't count on anyone coming to the rescue.
If the worst case scenario does happen, we'll never have enough assets. We need people to be aware of their own surroundings, be able to take care of themselves.
Authorities say this storm could bring something they've never seen before. This is the 258th consecutive day of flooding on the Mississippi River, the longest in history. And if Tropical Storm Barry becomes a hurricane, this will be the first time ever a hurricane will make landfall in Louisiana while the Mississippi is flooding. But experts advise don't get hung up on whether Barry ends up being a tropical storm or a hurricane. Don't worry about the category. The bottom line, it's going to get wet and it's going to be bad.
And that was Kim Brunhuber reporting there from New Orleans. Let's return to an earlier story we had. This is more on Guyon Esper's investigation into big tobacco and vaping. This feedback from Vanessa. My 16-year-old got R18 nicotine vaping gear online. She ordered the strongest product, which is to help 40-plus cigarettes a day smokers quit. She would never smoke cigarettes, she says, but somehow doesn't see vaping as the same thing. Neither do all her friends who now vape regularly. Lucky I intercepted the stuff and rang the company to cancel her account. They were surprised a 16-year-old would pretend to be 18 but have no other safeguards beyond a buyer ticking a box.
RNZ News at 6. Very good evening. I'm Paul Brennan. The Associate Health Minister, Jenny Salesa, has hit out at Philip Morris for targeting Māori in its bid to market a new e-cigarette. RNZ revealed this week that the tobacco giant is selling the IQOS device half price to Māori at marketing drives held at marae and rugby league clubs in South Auckland. Ms Salesa, who's the minister responsible for regulating e-cigarettes, says she opposes the tactics.
I'm extremely sceptical of any claims of big tobacco companies, be it Philip Morris or any other tobacco companies, saying that they are somehow wanting to help Māori people. They are only really truly answerable to their shareholders.
Jenny Salesa, Philip Morris says the IQOS is 90% safer than a tobacco cigarette, although experts say the harm done could eventually prove similar to that done by smoking. The maker of an online video showing Pākehā pretending to be Māori has taken it down after getting several complaints that it was insulting and racist. The video, which appears to have been filmed inside Te Whare Runanga at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, was brought to the attention of the Runanga's cultural advisor, Mori Rapana, last night. It shows several Pākehā posing as descendants of the Waikato Tainui Hapu Ngāti Hawa while wearing fake wigs and a tā moko. Mr Rapana says the Waitangi National Trust Board found it extremely offensive. The video's maker, Hudson Miller, says it was part of a church project and not intended to offend anyone. RNZ has contacted Ngāti Hawa for comment, but they are yet to respond. A News Hub journalist who was the victim of a homophobic assault says he's forgiven his attacker. Aziz Al-Safin and his friend Fergus Favell were attacked by Joden Martin, who said he was offended by seeing them there. Matthew Tunison reports.
The two men were walking along Auckland's Karangahape Road during Pride Week in February when the unprovoked attack happened. Martin kicked and repeatedly punched both men while yelling homophobic slurs. In the Auckland District Court today, Mr Al-Safin read a victim impact statement saying he and his friend were made to feel humiliated and worthless. As well as their physical injuries, he said it had a profound effect on their mental states. Martin's sentencing for the assault was postponed because it emerged he's facing a charge over a separate incident, and he was remanded on bail for sentencing on December the 3rd. This is Matthew Tunison.
An Auckland man says the police didn't act soon enough after his father-in-law was seriously attacked. Henry Liu says 56-year-old Retkun Lee is still in hospital after surgery for a brain injury and a broken jaw. Mr Liu says Mr Lee was attacked by 5 people after leaving work at a construction site in Flatbush at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. He says the attackers were about to kidnap his father-in-law before passers-by came along. Mr Liu says he phoned the police 3 times before they came to check the scene.
I think the action is quite slow because this is a very serious criminal case. It should be one of the highest priority of them.
Henry Liu. The police say they're investigating what happened. The Deerstalkers Association says many gun owners will be holding back from the first buyback to see how others are compensated. The police are holding 258 events around the country at which owners can hand over their now illegal firearms. The first is in Christchurch this weekend. An association spokesperson, Bill O'Leary, says owners are unhappy with the process but will comply with the law. However, he says there are serious concerns about the amount of compensation being offered. Mr O'Leary says a lot of people will be waiting to see how the first event goes, and he expects some will ask for a second evaluation of what their firearms are worth. The Philippines government has hit back at a decision by the United Nations Human Rights Council to launch a formal inquiry into its war on drugs. Activists say the move is long overdue. The ABC's Anne Barker has more.
The UN Human Rights Council narrowly voted to send a team to the Philippines to investigate the countless deaths since President Rodrigo Duterte launched a war on drugs soon after his election in 2016. Rights groups estimate the number killed is around 27,000, though Philippines police put the figure at 6,500. The Philippines ambassador to the UN rejected the resolution as a travesty of human rights. President Duterte says he's yet to decide whether he'll allow the UN investigators into the country.
Anne Barker reporting there. The animal welfare group SAFE says green chicken meat being sold in Pack and Save stores has come from fast-growing chickens, but the company that produces them says that is pure speculation. SAFE's head of campaigns, Marianne McDonald, says the green colouring is caused by the chicken's muscles growing faster than oxygen can feed into the muscle tissue. She says the birds are selectively bred to grow explosively fast, which often results in painful ailments when their bodies can't keep up with the growth. However, Brinks Poultry says the discoloration on the Pack and Save chicken is unrelated to green muscle disease. It says it's not a food safety issue, and the meat can be safely eaten. Donald Trump, who has one of the largest Twitter followings in the world, has held a social media summit at the White House, but as the ABC's Zoe Daniel reports, the big tech companies weren't there.
Facebook and Twitter have confirmed they weren't invited to the summit, which included conservative think tanks, media and social media figures. The president has about 61 million Twitter followers and is a prolific user, but has claimed the company prevents people from following him. He says he'll look at legislation to ensure transparency.
Big tech must not censor the voices of the American people. We hope to see transparency, more accountability and more freedom. That's on both sides.
The president says a larger summit will be held soon.
Zoe Daniel in Washington. It's 6:06. To sport now, just how far the Silver Ferns have come under new coach Nolene Taurua will be learnt tonight when New Zealand play their opening World Cup netball match against giant killers Malawi in Liverpool. The African side upset the Ferns in pool play at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games last year. Tonight the Ferns get the chance to redeem themselves, and it's a challenge Taurua is eagerly anticipating.
I am very confident about our whole Netball World Cup campaign, and I can't wait to play Malawi in the first game. I think, it's the opportunity for us to set the tone of what we're capable of in this tournament, but also knowing that each day we want to build. So I can't wait to get out there.
Nolene Taurua. The most captivating modern rivalry in men's tennis returns to the scene of its most dramatic episode tonight when Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal meet for a place in the Wimbledon final. Nadal has won 10 of their 13 Grand Slam matches, but he knows he'll have to be at his best to beat the grass court master.
I just expect to play against probably the best player of the history in this race, and know that I have to play my best if I want to have chances to try to be in that final. No? And he's playing well, he feels comfortable here, and me too.
The other semi features Novak Djokovic against Spain's Roberto Bautista. In New York, posters featuring American women's football World Cup star Megan Rapinoe, have been defaced with slurs written on them, and the police are treating it as a hate crime. That's the news.
Annabelle was taken out of her birth mother's life a week after being born. She spent 20 years trying to reconnect.
It was sort of like a physical pain, actually, particularly not knowing whakapapa.
Closed adoption into Pākehā families severed links between children and their Māori identity.
I really didn't have a concept of hapu, iwi, nothing.
On Insight, Te Anawā Huarahanganui investigates the outdated adoption laws and their impact on Māori after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning with Jim Mora on RNZ National.
Now we have the short forecast from Med Service taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Saturday, into the weekend. Northland to North Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty in the central high country. A period of rain this afternoon or evening. Thunderstorms are possible in the north and west. Mainly fine tomorrow. Isolated showers from Waikato southwards. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Scattered rain this evening. Otherwise fine. South Taranaki to Kapiti. Isolated showers turning to rain for a time this afternoon or evening. Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough. A period of rain this afternoon or evening. Then mainly mainly fine. Rain returning tomorrow evening. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered light rain this afternoon. Well, that's probably gone now. Mainly in Otago and Southland, fine tomorrow, but rain developing about the high country and southern lakes in the afternoon. That's tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain, heavy falls. Thunderstorms are possible about southern Westland and Fiordland. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers. It's nearly 9 minutes past 6.
Thank you. This is Checkpoint if you're just joining us, and I'm Lisa Owen. A serious fire in Christchurch is causing major traffic problems that are likely to last for some time tonight. So here's the details if you are heading home or in the area. The fire has closed Riccarton Road to traffic westbound from the intersection with Wharanui Road and Clyde Road, and from Middleton Road eastbound. Now, the police say they have evacuated some neighbouring properties as a precaution. Due to the size of the fire, the road closures are likely to be in place for some time. And transport officials say there is major congestion on Riccarton Road from Clarence Street westbound and from Hanson Lane eastbound. It recommends that road users avoid using Riccarton Road in the meantime or expect significant delays. If you're in the area there, do let us know what's going on, what you can see and how bad traffic is. So you can text in on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Let's go back to sport now. New Zealand will be the hardest side to beat. That's the assessment of the England captain, Owen Morgan, as his team prepares to face off against the Black Caps in Sunday's Cricket World Cup final. England surged to their first World Cup final for 27 years overnight, demolishing Australia by a sensational 8 wickets. Beaten by England in the pool play and playing the hosts in their own backyard, the Black Caps know that they're up against it. But Owen Morgan says the Black Caps' semi-final performance against India proved that they have what it takes to win.
India were completely done and dusted after the early wickets that New Zealand took. They bowled extremely well and took their opportunities. I think New Zealand throughout the whole tournament have been probably the hardest side to beat and the best side in the group stages. I think their performance in the semi-final was probably their best. And they're going to be a very difficult side to beat on Sunday.
So what do UK cricket fans think about New Zealand's chances in the final? Well, we spoke to people who watched last night's semi-final at a pub in London.
I think of the four semi-final teams, you'd have said New Zealand was the weakest on paper. But yeah, let's see. Hopefully England New Zealand final.
I'd rather be playing New Zealand than India. I mean, we had such a great game against them a couple of games ago. So, you know, and India, when they turn it on, they really do turn it on.
Do you think we've got a bit of chance against England then?
I'm really not sure. Maybe because of the big occasion, England haven't really been there many times before, whereas Australia do it day in, day out. So maybe it would give us just a slight edge against the Poms.
And have you got big plans for Sunday?
I'd love to get a ticket. If you find anyone who's got any spares, let me know. But it'll be probably at home with mates on the couch, get the Kiwis around and watch it there.
Do you know what? Right at the start, there was a couple of people saying, you know, New Zealand were not in it, but there was a couple of commentators saying, do you know what? They're a dark horse. You know, they can really come through, and you're in the final again. You know, so that's the second World Cup in a row. You know, and potentially finding form, just as we've potentially found form as well.
And that's cricket fans in a UK pub there. And don't forget, we will be live blogging on RNZ the cricket as it unfolds on Sunday night. So do get across that. A victim of a vicious homophobic assault in central Auckland says he never thought he'd have to endure such a thing in New Zealand. News Hub journalist Aziz Al-Safin and his friend Fergus Favell were injured when they were attacked during Pride Week in February. Their attacker, Joden Martin, claimed he was offended when he saw the pair standing outside a church, so attacked them completely unprovoked. Martin was due to be sentenced in the Auckland District Court today, but it was postponed. After it emerged, he's facing a charge in another court over a separate incident. Matthew Tunison was there.
The attack took place during Pride Week in February when Mr. Al-Safin and Mr. Favell were making their way down Karangahape Road. Joden Martin kicked and repeatedly punched both victims while yelling homophobic slurs. Mr. Al-Safin has previously said he thought he was going to die. He told the court about the impact this random act of violence has had on his life.
On the night, my friend Ferg and I were made to feel humiliated and worthless. The actions of Joden were intended to make us feel like we didn't belong and that we were wrong in living our lives the way that we were. We were assaulted verbally and physically, and that left a profound effect on both our mental states.
Mr Al-Safin said he'd like to think this was an isolated incident, but sadly he knows that's not the case.
That homophobic rhetoric still exists out there, as do the people with that same kind of extremist views that Jordan said he held. I grew up in a Catholic household. I know what religion is, and that isn't what religion is. I don't believe that those kind of extremist views belong here, or anywhere for that matter.
Martin started to cry as Mr Al-Safin spoke to him directly.
You have a lot of life left to live, and you have a lot of learning to do. You changed my life and Ferg's life forever. What you did was not acceptable, but to move forward, to help my own healing, I need to do this. I forgive you for what you did to me, and I hope that if there's anything that you take from today, it's that we all believe in the same thing, and that is love.
Jordan Martin's lawyer, Judith Walsh, said the assault took place on the anniversary of his father's death, something he'd never processed. She explained that his thinking had been muddled as she was questioned by Judge Robert Ronayne.
He felt that these people he obviously just picked upon were being disrespectful.
How were they being disrespectful in his mind?
Well, I think they were beside
They were standing in Auckland. How were they being disrespectful?
He instructed me that they were beside a church, and for some reason...
That a serious submission he wants me to...
No,
They were
he makes no...
respectfully standing by a church.
She said her client was very remorseful.
I don't know how his grief and his muddled thinking turned into an assault, but he seems to be not quite sure as well. But he's
thought
certainly...
they were homosexuals. He thought they were homosexuals.
I believe he did, sir. And so...
When I queried that when he pleaded guilty,
yes,
you indicated that he has religious views.
Well, no, sir. That was put wrongly.
Jordan Martin was remanded until December the 3rd, when he will be sentenced for the assault and the other unrelated matter. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis and Tēnei.
And it's just after 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, insists New Zealand has not given up on Australia relaxing its strict deportation policy, despite not raising the matter today. Mr Peters spoke briefly with his Australian counterpart, Maurice Payne, this afternoon, following their attendance at Indonesia's Pacific Expo in Auckland. The government has long been critical of Australia's practice of deporting New Zealanders, despite them having spent most of their lives across the ditch. Speaking after the meeting, Mr Peters told reporters the matter did not come up, but that doesn't mean New Zealand's conceded.
No, we haven't given up. But, I mean, the point is that we have to begin on the basis that Australia has got, as we have, every right to write its own domestic policy. That said, of course we're going to keep on focusing to get a far better understanding and what we would believe is a far fairer legal outcome, particularly when people arrived in Australia when they were 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 years of age. If they're arriving at 18, 19 years of age, it's a different story. So, yes, we're going to keep that dialogue up, but sometimes there are a whole lot of other subjects that have to be discussed, and we had quite a long discussion.
But any softening in Australia's position seems unlikely, with Maurice Payne telling media she has no intention of reviewing the policy.
These are issues that are discussed from time to time, but they're also always discussed in the context of the unique Australia-New Zealand relationship, the depth and endurance of that relationship, which is so significant between us. And in terms of whether we would take any approach to amending our own legislation, Australia, like New Zealand, would always consider its legislation in the context of our national interests and our national security. I think any sovereign nation would do so, and there's no intention to review those aspects of our legislation, no.
Australia's Foreign Minister Marise Payne speaking to reporters. Britain has called for de-escalation in the Gulf after reports that 3 Iranian vessels attempted to block the passage of a British oil tanker through the Strait of Hormuz. It's reportedly only backed down when confronted by a British Royal Navy ship. The UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt says the incident is a significant escalation in tensions. However, Iran has flatly denied a confrontation actually occurred. Iran's president has also said the British should expect retaliation after an incident in Gibraltar last week. The ABC's Isabel Rowe has this report.
Just a week after Royal Marine seized an Iranian oil tanker off Gibraltar, Iran might have made good on its promise of swift retaliation, blocking a British oil tanker as it tried to pass through the Straits of Hormuz.
It is escalation, it's a kind of brinkmanship, it's also signalling, and it's very dangerous.
Director of the Future of Iran initiative at the Atlantic Council, Barbara Slavin, is among many Iranian watchers concerned about the latest developments in the Persian Gulf. British authorities say the BP-owned tanker was headed out of the Strait of Hormuz when it was surrounded by 3 Iranian vessels. The British Royal Navy were already following their tanker as a precaution and stepped in, claiming they positioned themselves between the Iranian boats and their own tanker before the Iranians backed down. British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt.
Obviously very concerning developments. We are continuing to monitor the situation very, very carefully.
When Britain seized the Iranian oil tanker in Gibraltar, it accused Tehran of breaching EU sanctions and carrying oil to Syria. One Iranian official at the time threatened to seize a British tanker in retaliation. It worried British authorities enough to send the Navy to escort their tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, something Iranian President Hassan Rouhani scoffed at.
Are you crazy to do this much? The British have created insecurity in the seas, and they're solely responsible for everything that happens next.
Despite its threats, Iran denies any involvement in the latest incident. But word has spread in Tehran, where many residents say the British had it coming.
If you want to know my opinion, I agree with blocking the British tanker, because I think every action has a reaction.
It's the latest in a string of provocations involving Iran, including the shooting down of a US drone in the same area. The Atlantic Council's Barbara Slavin told the BBC Iran is beginning to breach some of the limits set in a 2015 nuclear deal.
It's a direct response to US efforts to choke off oil exports and to strangle the Iranian economy.
Former British Foreign Secretary and Prime Ministerial candidate Boris Johnson is willing to further increase military escorts in the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, I think it's very important that all vessels, UK flagged or otherwise, are able to use international waters in the Persian Gulf and elsewhere. Were I to be elected, I would be taking immediate advice about what extra steps we might need to protect UK vessels.
Let's return now to the large fire in Riccarton in Christchurch. Our reporter Logan Church is at the scene and joins us via live view. Kia ora, Logan, where exactly are you, and tell us what's going on?
Hi Lisa, yes, we're just metres away from Antonio Hall, which behind me is well and truly ablaze at this point. We can see fire crews spraying water onto the fire. Emergency services say they were called and arrived at the scene at about 5:30 and have been battling the blaze ever since. And for those who don't know the area, Antonio Hall sits right in the middle of Riccarton, not far from Westfield Mall. It's a Heritage 2 listed building, which we understand hasn't been occupied since the earthquakes, due to bad damage which hasn't yet been repaired. As I said before, we understand that no one was inside when the fire broke out, but it has caused quite a lot of disruption to the surrounding areas. Riccarton Road, which is a major travel route at this time of day in rush hour, is currently closed just to my left, and a lot of the neighbouring properties behind me have been evacuated, with residents standing out here on the street wondering what is going on. Emergency services are right up and down here. We just saw a fire and emergency worker running past us, and police have this area well and truly under their control. However, now the battle will be to get that blaze behind me under control and out.
Hey Logan, just if people who are watching, they'll be able to see there's quite a real orange glow behind you, pretty strong there, and we can see plumes of smoke coming from what's burning there. Can you give us a bit of perspective? How far do you actually think you are away from that?
So there is a small bank of properties just behind me, I would say about 2 or 3. So the property doesn't actually sit on the main road, it sits just a bit back, but the flames are very large and we can see well and clear from the road. There, looking around now, there's probably about 40 or 50 onlookers looking at the blaze, many of them residents hoping to find out what's going on and when they can return to their homes.
Thank you, Logan. That's Logan Church there, joining us from the scene of that fire. Just a reminder there, it has closed Riccarton Road to traffic westbound from the intersection with Wharanui Road and Clyde Road, and from Middleton Road eastbound. Police say they have evacuated some neighbouring properties in the area as a precaution. So if you're out on the roads, take heed of that warning, stay away from the area. Right now on Auckland's North Shore, tables are being set and plates of hot food, cakes and desserts are being dropped off as former All Black Ian Jones turns his hand to community cuisine. Ian and his wife Janine Graham Jones started the Friday night dinners a few months ago for anyone who needed a hot meal or just some cheery company. They now regularly have more than 30 diners and say anyone is welcome. Our reporter Rowan Quinn and video journalist Dan Cook went along to see what was on the menu.
You've got my apple crumble back again. Thank you. And I'll walk around and I want to see you smiling faces when you're eating it. I don't want you to cover it up in too much ice cream and custard. You will enjoy it.
Ian Jones is still striving for excellence, but this time it's in the kitchen rather than the rugby field. He's welcoming about 40 diners, many of them regulars, to the weekly community meal in Rosmini College's auditorium in Takapuna.
So macaroni cheese, salmon quiche, Thai beef rolls. Very lucky today.
And there's plenty more on the menu. Chicken, chop suey, casseroles, most of it dropped in by members of the community or cafes. Janine is the brains behind the operation and Ian's the front man, waiting at the door with the warmest of welcomes on a chilly Friday night.
How are you, man?
Very well,
How's
thanks.
the week been?
Yeah, very good.
Rocking up from the retirement village next door are a bunch of regulars. Anne and Eileen rally the troops.
So I told the girls when we went to Happy Hour to have a few wines about it, and Eileen was one of the ones that said, oh, I'd like to go, and I'm loving it.
What is it about it, apart from the food?
Just the friendship, the warmth, you know. And the beautiful food.
But it's not just for seniors. They've had new migrants who don't know many people, others trying to improve their English, rough sleepers, and some diners who just pop in to see what's going on. And there's a much younger crew, helpers from the community, like 9-year-old Abby.
I've set out some of the cutlery and one of the water jugs and the flowers and the cups. And the tablecloths.
The volunteers then sit down to eat too. Eileen loves the mix.
What I like about it is I don't have family in New Zealand, so I get to mix with middle-aged people, the volunteers, and the boys from Rosmini, so it gives me that mix of people rather than all seniors, yeah. Plus the food. The food is delicious and the volunteers are... There's so much love here.
Ian says it's great to see some of the diners form friendships that they're taking beyond the Fridays. Eddie's Meals is named after Ian's swimming squad and regular volunteers, Eddie's Eels. He says he and Janine started it because their family has been blessed, so they want to give something back.
So we opened our doors and whoever walked in through the door was the need, but one thing we always guarantee, whoever walks in, they'll be loved and respected, and that's kind of what we hope to get out of it, and that's what we have.
Eddie first popped in to check out the meal a few weeks ago and has been back every Friday since, helping the team to get the place set up before joining in.
I'm all right. I can look after and I can stand on my own 2 feet now, but the thing is that for a lot of people, well, look, a lot of them, it's, well, you can tell by the level of the conversation. So they're having a good time and enjoying themselves.
Though they sometimes have diners who can't afford to feed themselves, Ian points out that need isn't always about material hardship.
A lot of them are quite lonely and need some company and need sort of interaction with other people or a reason to come out. So some initially a little bit hesitant, saying it's not really for me, but when they come, they understand it was genuine. They understand that there is, that connection, that physical connection sometimes, but that verbal connection other times is a reason to come back. And others that have drifted in here have been, just for a nice hearty meal or maybe to ease the burden on one particular night. So we do that.
Dessert is as much of a smorgasbord as dinner, with ice cream, sponge rolls, chocolate eclairs and more. But there's one dish in particular that everyone's talking about.
Just a quick poll of how Ian's desserts are. What do you think?
Oh, it's beautiful. Really good.
It'll break my arms if I don't say the apple crumble.
Ian and Janine, who's a senior nurse, lead busy lives, but he says starting Eddie's Meals has given them so much. Lots of diners have become friends, and every week they look forward to hearing about what they've been up to.
There is a need, and we live on the North Shore of Auckland, in Takapuna here. There's no excuse that there's not a need for a community sort of get together like this, and so we're doing it every Friday night. We're always going to be here. Our doors will always be open, and people are more than welcome to come along.
And Ian says anyone who is keen to help with Eddie's Meals can get in touch with him via its Facebook page. He says they also love putting on entertainment for the guests, like jazz bands, singers or ballroom dancers, if anyone out there is interested. Just before we go, some feedback on our earlier story about a customer who says she was told to leave a Vodafone store because she was speaking Samoan. Mena has been in contact and says, when my kids were younger, I would tell them off in our first language and was often amazed that speakers of English just assumed they were being discussed. This then presupposes that when English speakers speak to their children, say in India, that they are being rude about Indians. Hey, thanks for all your feedback today. If you're driving in Christchurch, don't forget the fire on Riccarton Road. News will keep you up to date on all of that. And about that cricket. Go the Black Caps.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. 11 fire crews are battling a large blaze in an historic building on Riccarton Road in Christchurch. Properties around Antonio Hall are being evacuated. The Associate Health Minister, Jenny Salesa, has hit out at tobacco company Philip Morris for targeting Māori in its bid to market a new e-cigarette. The maker of an online video showing Pākehā pretending to be Māori has been taken down after getting several complaints that it was racist. And one person has died after two cars collided on State Highway 5 in Waikato this afternoon. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10. RNZ sports reporter Ravinda Hunia, who left the cricket in Manchester to go to Liverpool to be with the Silver Ferns. Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Everyone's kind of used to on the 31st of December they have a great big party and the next day it's the new year. Well, it's a little bit different.